Good evening, Twitter. It's your boy, Wayman IV. Today, we're going to be changing a GFCI outlet. Many GFCI outlets are often in places where things get wet, such as the kitchen. So wherever there's a sink, there's probably a GFCI outlet. Now you may notice this one's not a GFCI, but that's because it's on the same circuit as this one. When there's at least one in a circuit, it's all good. Now these things can be quite the pain to replace, so I'm going to walk you through how to do it. First of all, this one is going bad, and I can tell because after things are plugged into it for a while, it starts making like this hissing noise, and that's not good. Now, it still works, but it's the wrong color. It doesn't match the other switches and outlets in the house. So I'm going to be replacing it today, and these are the tools we're going to need. We're going to need some wire strippers, a screwdriver, both flathead and Phillips. This is like a dual one. It's pretty cool. We're going to, of course, need the new GFCI outlet. And it's really handy to have a night light. And I've also got this other cord which is connected to a box fan over there. So what I'm going to do is plug these in to show that the outlet does have power. The fan is moving, the light is on, and now we're going to go shut off the breaker. Now you're going to go to your breaker panel and look at this little sheet here. According to the sheet, breaker number 8 is the kitchen outlets. So we're going to go ahead and locate breaker number 8 and shut it off. Go upstairs after shutting off breaker number 8, and you may notice that this light is still on. So obviously the breaker is incorrectly labeled, or maybe it just does half the outlets in the kitchen. So I'm going to have to experiment. I'm going to shut off one breaker at a time and keep going through them until this light shuts off. So it's a good idea to plug something into an outlet before you mess with it so that you can verify that the power is still on. So if I had nothing plugged in here and I flipped that breaker and started working on it, I could have gotten electrocuted because the power is still on, even though supposedly the correct breaker has been shut off. So now I'm going to head all the way back downstairs. Closely, unlike me, there are two breakers that do the kitchen outlets. Now I don't know which one does which outlets, but we're going to try number 10 next. Back upstairs, you can see the fan has stopped and the light is off. So in case you have a house where the breakers are improperly labeled, this is a good test to find out if there's power going to your outlet if you don't have a voltmeter. Before we get started, we're just going to make sure our workspace is clear of random objects. And you're going to take your flathead screwdriver and just take off this cover. And that looks not good. I don't know exactly what that is, but it shouldn't be there. So it's a good thing we're replacing this. What you're going to do now is take these two top and bottom screws out. Oh, it might be kind of hard because these ones are painted over. They shouldn't be painted over, but now I have no idea what that stuff is. It looks almost like insulation, but whatever it is, it should not be in there, I don't think. Anyway, I'm going to take that out. I'd be a bit overwhelmed at how many wires there are coming off of this thing, but we're going to try to keep it nice and simple, and try to remember which terminals they're connected to in the case that they're not individually colored. Like these aren't. There's two white ones, there's two black ones in your ground. So this is going to be a bit complicated. So what I'm going to do is unbox this thing. Most GFCIs are different, but you're going to notice the same thing on all of them. This is the under this label it says the load terminals under this label are for feeding additional receptacles. So we are going to be using those because all the outlets on this wall are fed off this one. So yes, hi kitty, I see you. We're going to take a look at this one, and it is labeled on the plastic which ones are the load and line screws. So on this one, the bottom screws are for feeding additional receptacles, and the top ones are for bringing power to this outlet. So on this one, it's basically backwards. We just got to remember which wires go to which one. So first, I'm going to take the black load wire off by loosening the screw and pulling the wire off. Now, in this case, since the load terminals are on the top on the new one, I'm gonna bend that wire so that it's on the top right, which is where it's going to connect to that screw. Now I'm going to take off the power supply hot wire and I'm going to bend it down this way because that is the screw that's going to be connected to on the new outlet. So don't worry about bending the wires in ridiculous ways like this. As long as you have wire cutters, we can bend those back to the way they're supposed to be. As we can see, the bottom of this one is a bit burnt, which is not a good sign. These things do wear out after a while, and this one is pretty old. So it's a good thing we're replacing this. After you're done with it though, you can just throw it away. So for the more modern outlet, it's actually got Phillips compatible screws on it instead of just flatheads. So to make things easier, I'm just going to go ahead and equip my Phillips screwdriver. And you're going to go around the new outlet and just loosen all of these screws as far as they go. They don't come all the way out, so just loosen them as far as they go. Don't make them too tight because we're going to screw them in again, but you can probably even do it with your hands. Just go around and loosen every one of those screws. Now we're going to get all our wires straight. Now the cool thing about these new outlets is they have these little pinholes that you can just slide the wires in instead of having to twist them around the screws. So we're going to do that. But first, the wires need to be straight and not all curly like this. Now you can just take your wire strippers and bend the ends straight, which is hard to do because they're like thick wires. The easier thing I like to do though is just cut them off at the beginning of the part where they bend and make sure the next section of it is straight enough, and then you're going to go ahead and strip that off and make it about the distance of the outlet. I don't know how to describe that, but you know, don't make it too long, don't make it too short. It should be about that distance, if you can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to all the wires. Once all your wires are straight and stripped to the appropriate length, we're going to go ahead and start connecting them to the new outlet. So all you have to do to connect these wires in their straight fashion is slide them in the slot like that, make sure they go all the way in, and then just hold the outlet there and tighten the screw all the way, and once you do that, you should be good. So we're just going to repeat that process for the remaining wires. Make sure they are connected to the correct screw. If they're not, the outlet may not work. You're not going to start any fires or anything, but make sure they're on the right screws. If they're not, we'll have to rewire the outlet, which I'll talk about later. Another thing I want to mention is for the ones that have two slots on top and on the bottom of the screw, make sure the wire goes in this case, the bottom, because the screw turns clockwise to tighten. You want to put the wire in so that when you tighten the screw, the wire is pulled into the outlet, not pushed out of it. So the bottom of the screw is turning towards the outlet, the wire's going towards the outlet, so we put it on the bottom here. On the other side, you're going to put them on the top. Alright, so now all the wires are attached to their appropriate screws. We're just going to go and pull on all of them to make sure they don't come out. Extra safety precautions. And then you're ready to crumple them all up, try to keep them nice and orderly. We're going to shove them back into the box. Once you've got those wires crammed back in there, just go ahead and tighten the two screws, not all the way, just a little bit, because we're not done yet. We're going to test this before we put it all back together. So just tighten them enough so that nothing's sticking out. You know, as long as you don't shove your fingers back in there, you're going to be fine. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and plug in my nightlight again, and I'm going to run downstairs, turn on the breaker, and make sure everything works fine. So you might need to hit the reset button on it in case you accidentally hit the test button. But as you saw there, the light flickered on. This old thing is crappy, that's why it's flickering. That's not the outlet itself, that's the... Wow, that's really bad. There we go. Anyway, the light came on, both outlets work. You can go ahead and test and reset the outlet if you want. And in fact, since this outlet is on a multiple outlet circuit, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in here, and it works. And if I go ahead and test this, it shuts off the power to the rest of the outlets. So I'm going to go ahead and reset it. Light came back on. Now before we do anything else, just to be extra safe, I'm going to run downstairs and shut off the breaker again before we finish up. Our only step to do now is to tighten these screws the rest of the way and put the cover back on. Now, if your outlet does not work and it doesn't have power even after you press the reset button, you're going to have to take this out again and rewire it. Now, if you lost track of the wires and which ones were the line and load cables, it's not that big of a deal. You're just going to have to do trial and error until it works. But with 2 hots and 2 neutrals, the neutrals have to stay on the neutral side, the hots have to stay on the hot side. There's not that many possible combinations you could screw it up with, so it's really not that big of a deal. As you see here, I'm tightening these screws just a little bit at a time so they go in evenly, because we don't want those wires to pop out and go anywhere. Once the outlet is firmly in there, we're going to go ahead and take our new outlet plate, not our old one, because the old one is ugly, and slide that on there, and then flathead screwdriver. Let's switch that around again. Come on, there we go. And then go ahead and tighten the cover on. Where's the other screw? There we go. And just like that, it looks good as new. Let's go downstairs, turn the power back on, and you're good to go. Now you've probably got a little bit of a mess to clean up, which is okay. So just go ahead and throw the scraps away. I'm just going to throw away that old cover too, because it's gross. And my new outlet came with a bunch of these, which is pretty funny. All they let you know is that it's a ground fault protected outlet, and I already put one on my new outlet here. So I'm going to go down the rest of the wall and put these on them because they are ground fault protected, as we saw earlier with the nightlight. But other than that, obviously the stickers aren't necessary, but you're done. And you just replaced an outlet without the help of an electrician, so good job. So I actually decided to take this old one apart to see what was causing that burnt plastic. And as you can see, the electrical grid in it is actually like melting, which means that there was too much power flowing to this thing. So this is a 15 amp outlet, and I bet you the circuit going through it was 20 amps, and that caused the computer grid thing to fry like that, which is obviously not good. And as you can see, this coil is melted too. So had I left that in there for a couple more months, it might have started a fire. Probably not, but it could have. So I'm gonna go do some pro investigating. If you have an outlet like this in your house that's burnt, it's probably a good idea to get some electricians to check it out, because that can mean there's a worse problem somewhere else in the house. But I'm going to go do some investigating myself, and I'll see you in the next one.